Chapter 1851. The rejection was swift and without hesitation. Suddenly, a peal of laughter broke out. "Chuck, she's a Goldman. Are you sure you're going to reject her?" Daisy looked over at the man with long hair on the couch. He looked handsome with nice features and dressed fashionably. He had pale skin, and if it weren't for his low voice, Daisy would have thought he was a woman. Mr. Gray didn't know what to do. "Mr. Johnson, it's what the chairman wants." Charlie raised his head and blew a cloud of smoke. His gaze was sharp as he stared at Daisy through the smoke. "Miss Goldman should just join Royal Crown or Zester. Tenet is just a small company, and we won't be able to handle you. James Tell here is already too much." James put his hands behind his head and shook his leg. "There's no need to bring me into this." Charlie glared at him and put out the remaining half of his cigarette. "Get out and reflect on your actions." James clicked his tongue, got up, stopped in front of Daisy, patted her shoulder, and said with a cheeky smile, "You're going to have a fun time working with him." Daisy looked down. When the office quieted down, Daisy broke the silence. "I'd like to know why you're refusing to work with me. Is it because of who I am?" Charlie played with his lighter, and the blue flame flickered. "Rich people like you have always been treated well. Have you been through hardship? If you want life experience and are here to enjoy the fame of being in the industry, go elsewhere. Your family has a lot to give, so you will be able to do well on your own even if you don't sign with an agency. You chose this path because you're young and want to have fun. With your family background, you can get all the resources and get your way. I, as a manager, will have to cover up for you and try to clear your name. All you do is enjoy life and ignore what we tell you, so what's the point of me taking you in?" Charlie's words were painful to hear. Mr. Gray's expression changed, but he knew that Charlie had a strong personality. He was stubborn and extremely rigid. However, he was really good at securing revenue. He could pick a good script, or he wouldn't have been able to make the rich kid James a star in the 2 years since he joined. James was a wild man. He was not there to get life experiences, but because his father wanted him to. Mr. Tell hoped that his son would be able to hone his skills and improve his temper. Unfortunately, none of the managers could handle him, so Mr. Tell had to beg Charlie to take James under his wing. Charlie had only agreed because he could see how Mr. Tell was. James was hard to control, but Charlie wasn't a saint either. He had given a plan to Mr. Tell. He would confiscate his credit cards and sports cars and send him to train for 2 months. Charlie would personally supervise him and wouldn't even give him his phone. James had to face a lot of hardship during that time and finally started behaving. It wasn't until Charlie found a character that fitted James very nicely that he started getting some fame. After that, he went on a few shows, and Charlie made him look like an honest rich kid, and that was how he slowly became an idol over the past 6 months. Chapter 1852. After becoming famous, James was caught in a bar fight by the paparazzi, and he lost 500,000 followers in a night. Charlie had spent a year building his image, but James was a disappointment. That was why he was angry. Daisy was different from James. She was a Goldman and had a much higher net worth than James. Rejecting her like that was equivalent to digging his own grave. Mr. Gray was thinking about how to defuse the situation, but instead of being angry, Daisy smiled. "You don't know me. You think that I'm like James just because of who I am and won't even give me a chance. How could you already decide that I'm just here for fun?" Charlie finally looked at her. That girl looked much better than that rascal James. Charlie sat up straight and said, "Tell me, why did you choose Tenet when you could go with Royal Crown and Zester?" She replied, "I wanted to start from the bottom again, and I didn't want to use my family ties. I'm too close to Royal Crown and Zester. I don't need special treatment." Charlie knocked his knuckle on the desk and scoffed when he heard the words special treatment. "You're starting from the bottom, yet the chairman gave you a top-grade contract. Isn't that special treatment?" "That was the chairman's decision. I didn't ask him for that." Charlie stood up and waved his hand. Leave. I won't take you. He was adamant in his decision. Mr. Gray was anxious. Mr. Johnson, the chairman, Charlie cut him off. I'll speak to him about this. It was obvious he wouldn't even consider it. Daisy balled up her fist. She could always choose to get another manager if he refused to work with her, but she didn't want to do that. Her instinct told her that Charlie was the best choice. Mr. Johnson. Daisy stood in front of him and said confidently, you could try to work with me for a month. After that, I'll leave if you're still unhappy. Charlie was startled and looked at her with surprise. She looked determined and clean, cut, unlike the other arrogant socialites. He knew who Daisy was. The daughter of the famous Nolan Goldman from Bassburg, the Goldman princess who was a child actor and worked with Helios Boucher. She had experience with acting, and unlike James, she had potential. He didn't want to work with her because of who she was. The Goldmans were much more influential than the Tells, and even though he wasn't afraid of them, he didn't want trouble. Daisy also couldn't take the heat. Actors had to get down and dirty. It wasn't just about taking pictures and getting stunt doubles. If she couldn't do that, it would be a waste of time and resources that could be used on better actors. He didn't want that. Charlie had said all that so she would give up, because rich girls tended to leave in anger when they heard what he said. Unexpectedly, Daisy fought back. When Daisy saw that he was thinking, possibly considering, she continued. 1 month isn't that long, but I won't let you down. He smiled and looked into her eyes. 1 month it is. After that, you leave if I'm not satisfied. Daisy smiled. Deal. Daisy and Mr. Gray left the office. Mr. Gray put his hand on his chest because his heart was almost jumping out of his throat. I'm so sorry, Miss Vanderbilt, that's what Mr. Johnson is like. Please, don't be upset. Chapter 1853. Daisy smiled and said, that won't happen. I believe you. At Yarramore, at the Victoria Business College. Colton stood in the corridor and crossed his arms while playing with his malachite compass necklace. Cole. The spiky-haired friend walked over and rested his arms on his shoulder. Aren't we going to eat together? Right after saying that, he saw the necklace in Colton's hand and exclaimed, wow. Accessory from CD. Is that for a girl? Colton put the necklace away and said with no change in expression, for my sister. The friend smiled. Sure. By the way, what happened to your pretty groupie? Colton frowned. Why do you want to know? Why are you nervous? I was just asking. Doesn't she usually follow you around? I haven't seen her recently. Wasn't she chasing you? That made Colton feel awkward. His friends didn't know about his bet with Freya, and when Freya met him previously, it was mostly because he requested it. It wasn't about chasing. The friend was shocked. Why would she buy things for you if she wasn't chasing you? You got free food and drinks and a free runner? He had a wager with his other friends that Freya was chasing Colton, and they were betting on how long it would take her to succeed. Colton didn't speak but turned and left. The spiky-haired friend followed along. Hey, aren't we going for food? That evening, Freya got a text from Daisy while she was leaving the college. Daisy, have you had dinner? I'm getting ready to sleep already. That came with a crying emoji. It looked like her. Freya smiled and replied, rest early. Someone suddenly approached her when she turned around, making her forehead bump into that person's lips. Before Freya could react, Colton rubbed his lips that were hit by her head. It hurt so much that his skin almost broke. Watch where you're going. You should take your advice. Freya frowned while rubbing her forehead. He wasn't the only one hurting. Her head wasn't made of steel, after all. Colton laughed. Did you do that on purpose? She looked up and asked, what? Colton crossed his arms and raised his brows. You bumped into me when you saw me. Playing hard to get? Freya chuckled. Do you think that you're funny, Colton? Might as well say that I'm seducing you. If she was playing hard to get, then he might as well say she was seducing him. Colton stopped smiling as an image flashed across his mind, and he looked away. With your figure? He wanted to say that she was gifted but not in brains. Freya paused and remembered what had happened on the island. The air immediately froze. Her expression was awkward, and she couldn't stay there any longer. I'm going to leave. She walked to the road and hailed a cab. Colton stood on the spot until the cab drove away, his mind in a mess. He took out the necklace, thinking he must have gone crazy when he bought it. Back at Bassburg, at Tenet Media. In the manager's office, Charlie placed the script in front of Daisy, poured a cup of coffee, and sat across from her. There's a spot for a supporting actress in Benny Crawford's new movie. The audition is 1 month later. Daisy picked up the script, and it was an action period piece. There were 2 scripts, one for the storyline, and the other for the supporting actress. Chapter 1854. Before Daisy spoke, Charlie raised his eyebrows and looked at her. The chairman said you requested to pick your own scripts, but that wasn't related to me. You have probation. If you can land this role in a month, I'll accept you. Is it hard to get the role? Asked Daisy. Charlie chuckled and slowly took a sip of his coffee. Take a look at it. Daisy skimmed through the storyline and the character settings. The character was a woman from the demon tribe. She was an antagonist and had 2 personalities, which meant she had a personality disorder. There was a need to train on the character's personality. The character was strong in sorcery and martial arts, so there were a lot of fight scenes. Not only would she need to be hanging with wires, but she would also need to fight in the water. It was obvious that it wouldn't be easy to carry the character perfectly. Most A-listers would get a stunt double for the difficult action scenes, but Charlie would not allow her to get a double and wanted her to take this character. Charlie put down his cup when he saw her hesitating. Actresses from Royal Crown and Zester will also be auditioning for this character. I provided an opportunity, so it's up to you if you can get it or not. You have a month to prepare for it. Naturally, you can always give up. Daisy looked up and stated, I will get it. Charlie stood up. Don't be too arrogant. Benny Crawford is very critical when it comes to his movies. You need to train on your fight scenes and acting. Daisy left the office with the script and then stood in front of the elevator. After the door opened, James walked out with his hands in his pockets. He wore a gold pair of glasses with chains, had messy hair, and seemingly had eyeliner on. His pretty eyes looked extra foxy. He had a pink jacket on. Even though pink usually looked innocent, it looked seductive on him. Yo. He adjusted his glasses, stopped in front of Daisy, and looked at the script in her arms. You've got a script already? Charlie is rushing this. Daisy smiled sweetly. It's a chance that Mr. Johnson gave me to train my acting skills. Training acting skills? James clicked his tongue. He's obviously torturing you. After saying that, he looked around, leaned in, and lowered his voice. Listen, Chuck is the devil himself. Everyone gets to use a double, but nobody who works with him gets that. You don't know how tough acting is. Daisy felt awkward that he was complaining to her. Acting has always been tough. You're crazy, aren't you? You could enjoy being Miss Goldman, yet you're in this industry? James looked at her and didn't understand. If it weren't because my dad forced me to, I would rather go back and take over the family business instead of acting. I shouldn't have to go through this hardship. James tell. Charlie was standing at the door of the office, glaring at him. James smiled and walked over. I'm just welcoming the new colleague. Charlie didn't want to listen to him. What happened to your letter of apology? It's done. I brought it over for you to see. James put his arms around Charlie's shoulder and flashed a sheepish smile. Let's look at it inside. Charlie slapped his hand away and glared at him as a warning before turning to look at Daisy with no expression. Why are you still there? Get ready. Chapter 1855. Daisy snapped back, immediately said yes, and quickly walked into the elevator. When she got back to her space, someone was there. The person standing in front of the window looked foreign yet familiar until he turned around. Daisy was shocked. Godfather? Helios had stubbles and seemed more mature, but still looked charming. He walked over to the couch and said, I heard your dad say that you're here. He wanted me to get you a manager, but you've already found Charlie. Daisy sat down too. He worries too much. He poured a cup of tea and smiled. How could he not worry? He was only all right because you were working with me, but now that you're older and have to deal with everything alone, it won't be as comfortable as when you're at home. Daisy looked down. I've mentally prepared myself for that. She couldn't back down after taking this route. He saw the script that she was holding and narrowed his eyes. Charlie made you audition for Benny's new movie? Daisy paused, then looked down. Yeah. He wants to test me. He'll work with me if I can get the role next month. That's interesting. She was surprised. Interesting? Helios smiled. Benny is famous in the movie scene, and most new actors don't stand a chance. And listers would lower their price just to get the role, and I heard that all the actors who have auditioned for this movie are really great actors. That would mean that Daisy needed to work against a group of talented actors for the role. That was why Charlie had asked her not to be too confident. He knew that it wasn't going to be easy. Helios looked at her and asked, Do you want me to put in a word with Benny? Daisy rejected his offer. No, I want to do it by myself. Fair, you're a big girl now. You can get it on your own merit. Helios nodded. They chatted for a while more, and Daisy walked him out. They were having a good time, just like father and daughter. However, two actresses who were standing behind a wall saw that. That's the Goldman girl. She got a top-grade contract off the bat, such a Goldman privilege. Even Mr. Boucher is helping her. Ames, I'm guessing you're going to have competition for the role in Mr. Crawford's movie. You need to watch out, the actress reminded the woman with short hair next to her. Unlike this girl, next door actress, the short-haired woman had a cool look and did well in maintaining her figure. She was skinny, but voluptuous. Amy looked at her. Be careful with what you say in the office. It's easy for people to overhear. The girl pouted. I'm just looking out for you. You're the top actress here, because you're talented and Mr. Johnson admires you. She, on the other hand, is just like James Tell. They only got in because of their families. Even if she was a child star, she shouldn't be as good as you are. All right, let's go. Amy turned to leave. The actress wanted to say something but stopped and followed along. Ever since she got the script, Daisy started researching her character and even set an alarm every day to train. She would train in weight, lifting in the morning, yoga and boxing at noon, then swimming and diving in the evening. Her training was well arranged throughout the day. Chapter 1856. Daisy would cite her line when she was eating and practice toward the mirror inside her room once she returned home. Time passed rapidly, and it had already been over half a month. Daisy was able to train her physique much better than before. Not only was her waistline more obvious and tighter, but the muscles in her arms were much firmer. At noon, she practiced her fighting skills with the combat instructor in the training room. After roughly 2 hours, Daisy collapsed on the sponge mat, her neck covered in sticky sweat. Someone appeared from the door, and Daisy sat up. It was James. James took off his sunglasses and said, You're so hardworking. I can't believe that you've already started training, even if you don't know if you'll get the character or not. Daisy walked to the side and picked up a towel to wipe her sweat. Well, it's always nice to be well prepared. Let me remind you something. Many artists auditioned for this role, so you may not necessarily get it. Even if you are selected, there are several months of rehearsals after entering the group. You don't have to rush everything now. Daisy turned her head around to look at him. What are you doing here? To visit you, of course. He walked toward Daisy and said, matter of fact, look, both of us are the same. You're pretty, rich, and smart, while I'm rich. I'm your senior, while you're my junior. In Tenet Media, both of us are born into a prestigious family, so don't you feel like you've met your good friend? Daisy asked in confusion, don't you tell me that we should be friends? That's what I'm saying, he replied sternly. We both have the same family background, so we have the same topic. We're from the same circle and different from those who are desperate to get to the top. In other words, James despised the poor and favored the rich. However, Daisy could understand him as well. He came from a rich family, so all the friends he made were from the upper-class society in Basburg. Besides, James did not become an actor because he aspired to be one. It was exactly because he had everything from the moment he was born that he loathed those people in the entertainment industry who tried their very best to get to the top. Daisy was at a loss for words before saying straightforwardly, I think we're not the same kind of people. James said, what? I became an actress because I chose to. I'm different from you. Besides, I like acting, and I like this job, she said sternly before turning and going away. James followed after her and continued. Hey, are you serious? You said you like acting? What's so good about acting? She stopped in her tracks, turned around to look at him, and said, it doesn't matter if it's good or not. You have never put any effort into your career, so you don't think it's good. You think it's suffering coming to the entertainment industry, but it's actually an opportunity to experience. Only when you enjoy the experience and the result of your work will you find that in any career, as long as you treat it with care and dedication, you'll be rewarded. Do you want to spend your life as an uneducated, rich kid at home? James was stunned, and he was tongue-tied. Suddenly, a voice rang out. Well said. The person who was walking toward them was a woman with a short haircut. She had put on light makeup and wore a white chiffon shirt with pearl jewelry and a tight black leather skirt that further accentuated her good physique. When James saw her, his face sank, and he said sarcastically, talk about the devil. I didn't think you'd come here too, Queen of Tenet. Daisy was stunned. Queen of Tenet? Isn't she the actress that works under Charlie too? As expected of an A-tier actress, she looked rather imposing. Chapter 1857. Amy smiled and said, young Mr. Tell, I thought we were working under the same company? How can you be so cold to me? James turned his face sideways and replied in a haughty manner, Tisk, since when did I ever say that I'm working under Tenet Media? I'm different from you. Amy went along with him and continued. Yeah, you're right. We're different. The reason you can be popular is because of Charlie. Now that you've gained some fame, you decided to sack him off. Quit lecturing me. If you want to be Charlie's dog, then go ahead. I'm not listening to him, and I won't be an A-lister. James did not want to talk to her anymore, so he turned around and left after he finished speaking. Daisy looked at his back and fell deep in thought. She could understand why he didn't like being an actor, but why would he hate it so much? Miss Vanderbilt, I apologize for what happened just now. Amy looked at her and said, James comes from a prestigious family, so he can be a bit of a loose cannon. By the way, I like what you said just now. Since she was her senior, Daisy replied respectfully, I really like being an actor. That's why I chose to become one. Well, I think I can take it as training as well. She nodded. I can see that you're different from James. Daisy thought for a moment and asked, Miss Holt, can I know why James hates being an actor so much? Amy said, probably because of his mother. His mother? James's mother is a very experienced actress in the entertainment industry. She's on the same level as Mr. Boucher. Have you ever heard of Marijuana Gonzalez? Daisy replied in shock, I know her. She had worked with Miss Mayweather before. Zyla had worked in the entertainment industry. Daisy had seen her acting before, and Marijuana was the heroine of the movie. Daisy felt something was wrong and said, "Wait a second. Even if Miss Gondolez married earlier than Miss Mayweather, she wouldn't have had a son as big as James, right? Marijuan was about the same age as Zyla, and Zyla's daughter was only a few years old since Zyla only gave birth to her a few years ago. Even if Marijuan had married earlier than Zyla, there was no way James would be the same age as her." Amy chuckled and said, "Miss Gondolez already had a son before she became an actress. She kept her marriage status hidden, and then the media only discovered that she had a son when James was 15 years old. While James's identity was exposed, Miss Gondolez was having a divorce from his father. The two of them decided to end their marriage because they were separated from each other more than staying together. James probably doesn't like the entertainment industry because he couldn't get his mother's love from childhood." Daisy was rendered speechless. Marijuan had kept her marriage status a secret, and nobody knew James existed. In other words, James couldn't appear in public alongside his mother. It was only now Daisy saw the light as to why James detested the entertainment industry so much that he refused to become an A-lister even though Charlie had promoted him. "Oh yeah, I believe you've received an invitation for a role in Mr. Crawford's new film, right? I heard that you're already preparing for the audition that will be held next month." Daisy smiled and nodded. "Well, I want that role very much." "That's very unfortunate then. I'm your competitor." Daisy was stunned. Then, she said with a smile, "I'm auditioning for the Lady of the Dragons next month too. I'm looking forward to your performance. No matter what happens in the end, I hope it'll be the actors and actresses from Tenet who get the role. After all, Mr. Crawford is very popular in the entertainment industry, and many A and B-listers want to star in his film. This will be a very rare opportunity. Thank you for your guidance, Miss Holt." "I'll do my best," replied Daisy. Chapter 1858. When Amy was leaving, she reminded Daisy, "Also, don't try to take any shortcuts. Mr. Crawford hates it the most when actors or actresses get into his project through the back door. You'll have to fight for the role if you really want it." Daisy had been learning from Amy for the next couple of days, and Amy was willing to pass on some acting experience to her as well. For Daisy, Amy was her senior. Besides, she was 5 years older than her, and she treated her like her own sister. Charlie was standing in front of the mirror in his office. There was a cigarette between his fingers, and when someone knocked on the door, he flicked the ashes into the ashtray and said without turning his head, "Come in." Amy pushed the door and walked into his office. She stopped behind him and said respectfully, "You're looking for me, Chuck? I heard that you've been helping Daisy lately, and you also passed on some of your acting experience to her as well?" Charlie turned around and looked at her. She smiled and replied, "Yeah. She's my junior, after all. Besides, she's pretty dead serious when it comes to becoming an actress." Charlie took a draw from his cigarette before crushing the butt out in the ashtray. "Both of you are going to audition for the same role. Are you not worried that she will get it first?" Amy lowered her head and replied, "If she could get the role, it means she's good enough for it. Just because I'm guiding her doesn't mean that I'm giving up on that role." Charlie chuckled and said, "Well, it's good that you understand. She does have more potential than James and other newcomers. However, both of you are actresses under the same company. It's necessary to help each other, but it's important for you to fight for what you want without pulling any punches." Amy raised her head and looked at him. "But I don't understand, why are you telling me this?" He sat on the couch and continued. "She has been acting since she was a child, so she thinks that she can make it if she has confidence in herself. However, one won't be able to train their willpower if they can get everything they want. They need some setbacks. This is the first time she entered the working society after graduating. Although she has ambition and perseverance, if she doesn't want to rely on her family, she must shed her innocence in a place like the entertainment industry, which is filled with vicious and greedy people." Amy was stunned. "So you're saying that?" Charlie picked up the cup and continued slovenly. I want you to show her with your strength that a successful actor isn't necessarily a good actor. To become a successful actor, you have to be able to pick yourself up and continue to march forward despite the setbacks. In other words, Charlie wanted her to get the role no matter what. Amy had full faith in herself. After all, she had worked with Benny before. Besides, even if Daisy had been an actress since she was a kid, she was working with Helios. Now that Daisy was all alone, she had to rely on herself if she wanted to become successful in the entertainment industry. However, was it true that Charlie wanted to train Daisy's mind and willpower through setbacks? Amy did not know why Charlie was doing that. After all, Charlie was not Daisy's manager yet, and Daisy was still in the probation period. He wanted her to be successful, but at the same time, he wanted her to experience setbacks. Thus, Amy did not know if Charlie wanted to become Daisy's manager or not. Soon, the day for the audition came. It was said that Benny himself had handpicked the hero and heroine, and more than 100 actresses had come to audition for the role of the Lady of the Dragons. After Daisy got the number, she waited in the hall. She was nervous, so she grabbed the ring on her neck tightly. As if the ring was imbued with magic, she calmed down very soon. When Amy had finished her audition, she ran into Daisy in the hall. She walked toward her and greeted, "Miss Vanderbilt." Daisy stood up. "Ames, have you finished your audition?" She smiled. "Yeah. By the way, you seem nervous." Chapter 1859. Daisy lowered her head. "Yeah. I'm nervous." Amy walked up to her and put her hand on her shoulder. "Don't be nervous. Just treat it as your normal practice session. When you're in there, don't always think that you want to succeed. The higher expectations you have, the more pressure you'll feel, and having pressure will affect your performance." Daisy looked at her. Amy was indeed a very experienced actress. Daisy had calmed down a bit after listening to what she said. She smiled and said, "Thank you so much, Ames." Amy smiled. "We're from the same company, and we both are working under Charlie. You don't have to thank me." Soon, it was Daisy's turn for the audition. Daisy bade her goodbye and left with the staff. The audition was held in a studio the size of a basketball court. Many artists' profiles were on the table, including some of their photos. Daisy presumed that the man who seemed to be over 50 years old sitting in front of the machine was Benny. After changing into her costume, she walked under the spotlight. The scriptwriter on the side held his chin and whispered something into Benny's ear. Benny raised his head and said, "Stand in front of the camera." Daisy did as she was told. Benny studied her for a while and frowned. "Girl, your eyes are far too pure. It doesn't match the original setting of the Dragon Lady. Have you read the script?" The Dragon Lady had a complicated setting. Her eyes were filled with ambition, but Daisy's eyes were too pure and innocent. Benny couldn't see any hint of ambition in them at all. Daisy clutched her hand tightly without saying anything. The scriptwriter thought she was getting herself ready, but Daisy still did not say anything after he had waited for a long while. "Miss, are you going to audition for the role or not? If you're giving up your chance, we'll move on to the next candidate. There are many people, and we don't have time to waste." However, Daisy still did not say anything in return and just stood there. The scriptwriter became impatient and rose to his feet. "What is wrong with you? Did you not hear what I'm saying?" Every crew member in the scene could feel the tension in the air. However, Benny was staring at the camera and fell into thought. The scriptwriter thought Daisy was here for fun. He walked over to her and said, "You're a newcomer, right? Do you know the rules here? If you're giving up, then get out of here. Don't waste our time." Just when the scriptwriter was about to chase her away, Daisy lifted her eyes and said, "Who do you think you are? Did I give you permission to speak?" The scriptwriter was stunned for a moment. Just when he was about to lash out at Daisy, he realized that she was citing the line of the Dragon Lady. Her eyes were too pure. They did not look intimidating at all, and they had no ambition. However, right now, her gaze is filled with arrogance and contempt. Besides, she could deliver those lines very well and bring out the Dragon Lady's high and mighty character. Benny suddenly chuckled. Not bad, girl. It seems like we were wrong about you. Daisy smiled and said, I'm sorry for making you wait so long. Benny looked at her and asked, what do you think about the Dragon Lady? I've gone through the character, and in my opinion, the Dragon Lady isn't bad. She's just forced by the circumstances. I see, replied Benny. Can you elaborate more on that? Daisy took a deep breath and said slowly, the Dragon Lady is the last demon lord. She knows that the heavens' machinations cause the dragon tribe to fall from grace to their demise. It's because she's a demon that no one wants to accept her. She treats everyone who wants to take her life as evil, even though they represent justice. For her, those who refuse to submit to the demon should be executed, and that's why she forms another extreme personality. Chapter 1860. In my opinion, the Dragon Lady is a sad character. Everyone thinks that she's evil, because she's killing people. So does it mean justice when the heavens take the life of the demons? When Daisy came out of the building after she had finished with her audition, the roaring sound of a car engine erupted in the distance. She looked toward the source of the sound and saw a purple sports car coming in her direction. She took 2 steps back, and the car stopped in front of her. The window on the top opened up, and the one sitting in the driving seat was none other than James. After all, Daisy couldn't think of anyone else who would change the exterior of his sports car to this fancy bright color. James looked around and asked, Miss Vanderbilt, are you serious? You're the daughter of the Goldmans, and you don't even have a car? Daisy crossed her hands in front of her chest and said, it's none of your business. James walked toward her, removed his sunglasses, grinned at her, and asked, would you like me to be your driver and give you a ride? No thanks. Daisy did not want to sit inside such a fancy car. James let out a sigh purposely and said, do you know how many girls want to sit in my car, but I don't let them? She massaged her temple and asked, what did you come here for? I already told you before. I want to be your friend, but you keep giving me the cold shoulder and being very rude to me. You're going to lose a handsome friend like me this way, do you know that? Daisy suddenly realized that not only was James childish, but he was a narcissist too. I suddenly think that it's really not an easy job for Mr. Johnson to make you into an A-lister. James frowned. What do you mean? She patted his shoulder and said in a serious manner, I think your face isn't the reason your fans like you. They must have treated you like their stupid son who needs the care and love of his mother. What? That's so rude. James snarled as he glared at Daisy for calling him stupid. Daisy chuckled and patted his head as if she was teasing a little boy. Be a good boy and go to the side to play with your toys. I have to go right now. The paparazzi hiding in the dark hit the shutter button and captured the scene in time. 2 days later, both Daisy and James appeared on the headline. At the management department in Charlie's office. Charlie was sitting on the couch, and his face was dark. Daisy and James were sitting opposite of him. The former looked nervous, while the latter seemed indifferent. You have only signed a contract with Tenet for a month, and you've just been caught in a fight not long ago. How can you two be involved in a scandal right now? Do you know how much trouble you've caused me? Daisy hastily explained, we're not seeing each other. The media is making things up. Charlie rose to his feet and continued. You are artists, and that means you are public figures. If you had paid more attention, would they have been able to create a story out of nothing? He massaged the bulging veins on his forehead to calm himself down. Daisy lowered her head and apologized honestly, I'm sorry, Mr. Johnson. I'll be more careful next time. Charlie waved his hand and sent both of them out of his office. James had been wanting to leave for a long time, so he left the office without any hesitation. When Daisy was about to leave the office, Charlie called out to her. She turned her head and asked, is there anything else? Charlie looked at her and asked, have you received any notice for the casting? Daisy was stunned and clenched her fists tightly. She had not received any notification that said she had passed the audition. Charlie sat on the couch with his legs crossed and said, "It seems like you didn't get the role." Daisy lowered her head and replied, "Okay." She turned around and left. In the corridor, she ran into Amy. Amy walked up to her with a smile and stopped in front of her. "Miss Vanderbilt, I'm afraid I have to say sorry to you. I've gotten the role of the Dragon Lady."